It's a pleasure for me to be back in New York, collaborating again with the Catholic Artists Society, so I'm honored by the invitation and your presence. Also very grateful to my brothers for inviting me. They knew I would be free on Valentine's Day. I'm glad you are as well. They perhaps did not anticipate that I would speak on death. The talk's a solid hour, so let's get on with it. Film, the aesthetics of death, and the cultivation of human life, picturing motion after modernity. Film is an original medium of the technological age. As such, film is uniquely disposed to manifest the aesthetic forms of our contemporary culture. By aesthetic, I mean a frame of reference according to which perceptions are apprehended, arranged, and interpreted. A framework in which sensation and meaning are connected. By form, I mean the main reason, theme, or style that renders general aesthetics, or aesthesis, into a particular kind. The aesthetic form I want to explore is of death, as given in the experience of film. We can speak of death in two ways, at least, according to objective or subjective senses of the genitive. That is, as the aesthetics of death, or as the aesthetics of death. In one way, it is that whose perception is ordered by death to be life-taking. In the other, it is that whose perception takes death into living account. More of this in due course. For now, please be assured, even when my descriptions seem bleak, my eyes strain in the twilight of dawn, not dusk. Somewhat like Binks Bowling in Walker Percy's novel The Moviegoer, I think movies are onto the search, but they screw it up. But this also means that when film aspires to be an art of the beautiful, an art of human life, it can uniquely manifest our modern need for redemption. The overall point tonight is to prospect evangelical gains for the cultivation of human life in our age. I shall end, I hope, neither in defeat nor in triumph, but in possibility. I shall first talk about death, then about film, then about the twofold aesthetics of death in film, as I understand it. This lecture is an exercise in thinking to invite reflection. The goal is simply to describe some of what can be said, not to define what must be said. Be advised, my discussion contains a spoiler or two. But true art cannot be spoiled. Indeed, in good narratival art, knowledge of the ending invites repeated breedings. And by the way, such is the art of Christian life. We know how it ends. Hebrews tells us faith is the substance of what is hoped for. And this makes existence all the more rewarding. Allow me to make a pastoral and philosophical aside that will also serve as a segue. I love preliminaries. In focusing upon death, I do not mean to be moribund, only realistic. This is the main reason I am a Christian. It is the most realistic of wisdoms and arts. The finality of death is the premier concern for the unique kind of being that we are. Existentialism did not discover this. According to ancient Greek categories, the kind of being we are properly concerns death. We are mortals. And even for Christianity's God incarnate, it was necessary to die. So for any of you, burdened with recent experiences of death, I am sorry for your loss. I hope our meditation tonight buoys you with hope rather than buries you in sadness. But what does it mean to experience death? While not an original question, it is self-evidently an ultimate one. One way to think about the experience of death is as a non-experience. That is, as a reality whose essence cannot be experienced. If by experience of death we do not mean dying, but becoming and more so being dead, death follows upon and thereby escapes all the experience that leads to it. Let us simply define experience as that which is constituted through one's own perceptions, sensations, and reflections. To be in a state of death, then, is to be subject no longer to experience, at least not experience ordinarily communicable. The experience of death is the death of experience. As a result, this is important, death is wholly unimaginable. As Freud observed, we cannot imagine our own death. Whenever we try to do so, we find that we survive as our own spectators. We can revise this fantastic impossibility comically with Woody Allen. I'm sure many of you know this one. I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Suffice it to say, the simple fact of death makes us complicated. Another way to think about the experience of death is as the loss of another through death. In a very meaningful sense, one who has lost a loved one can say that she herself in some way has died. But in this case, what one experiences is the effect of another's death. This is indirect or mediated, though it is no less real. In this case, one experiences death precisely through continuing to live, and this, of course, exacerbates the pain. As a consequence, this indirect experience always portends the direct experience of death, and we have already said that death is not directly an experience. Thus, we play chess with death. Our family and friends are captured before the inevitable checkmate, but even though death finally appears on the dramatic scene of our lives, it has nothing to reveal. As death says in Bergman's The Seventh Seal, I have no secrets. I know nothing. Death takes everything away because it gives nothing. In both experiences of death, death shows itself while withholding itself. Death seems to give itself completely, but it gives nothing. It makes life a zero-sum game. While death is decidedly real, that is to say, it's ontological, it's an identifiable thing, it never approaches the status of being given in experience. I've been harping on this. Its event is rich in phenomenality, the stuff of experience, indescribable matter for perception, sensation, and reflection, but it possesses no essence, no identity. Death is nothing. It shows itself, but it gives nothing that of itself could be meaningfully construed. Now we'll see why I was harping on this. It is here that I want to introduce the culture of death. The culture of death is that matrix of symbols, roles, and mores that, utterly configured by death, does not register the problem of death. I'll say that again. The culture of death, objective genitive, is that matrix of symbols, roles, and mores that, utterly configured by death, does not register the problem that death is. The culture of death puts to death the problem of death. Such a culture has not the means or desire to signify the non-significance of death. Such a culture cannot cultivate. Consider again Walker Percy, who quotes Soren Kierkegaard's sickness unto death by way of epigram to the moviegoer. The specific character of despair is precisely this. It is unaware of being despair. The culture of death is that social tapestry of imagination, idea, and action where death reigns over us and is yet least apprehended for what itself evidently appears to be, the term of our life. No longer construed against the threat of nothingness, life is virtually annihilated. Instead of crying out against the meaninglessness of death, we tearfully laugh about the meaninglessness of life. The great comedy of recent time, you will recall, was one whose situation was nothing. Yada, yada, yada. This may sound a lot like Hemingway's clean, well-lighted nada, 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 but the former bears no allusion to John of the Cross's Todo y Nada. However inseparable, there is a difference between the lament of modernism and the revelry of postmodernism. Blah, blah, blah. It's all good, whatever, just do it. The dictatorship of relativism is the dictatorship of death. Let us think about nothing while, as one NYU luminary has said, amusing ourselves to death. And yet, the standards of modern science and technology provide the governing matrix of our values and needs. Christendom has been overthrown. The hope for heaven has been replaced with confidence in that most liberal of ideals, progress. The faith that saves is the assurance that we are perfectly better off than our parents, saved from the futile conduct of our ancestors, to crib the words of St. Peter. Fascinated by the Industrial Revolution, Marx was not wholly wrong in materializing Hegel's idealized history, neither of whom, at the end of the day, had any real place for fine art as such. Modern reason has become identified with scientific criteria and technological agency. Now, human beings have always been technological, but now we are technologized, instrumentalized. And so, as St. John Paul has pointed out, the sense of God and man has become eclipsed. And as a consequence, the prophet points out, thus we conceive the culture of death, according to John Paul, as a malaise of conscience, as a deadening of man's critical sense. Not just his critical thought, but his critical sense. Assuredly, the ideas and policies of the culture of death lead us to think we are free while being enslaved, but more fundamentally, its media and images lead us to sense that we can be or even are free under its domain. The realistic categories of nature and truth become increasingly irrelevant as we think of ourselves as connected and tolerant and therefore just. We are disposed to identify with and conform ourselves to icons, styles, and slogans that do not liberate but violate. In bad faith, we mindlessly choose standards of living that defigure and deaden us, all the while thinking we are enlightened and progressive, free and happy, truly alive. As the Native American in Jim Jarmusch's brilliantly despairing film Dead Man repeatedly exclaims, I'll censor this appropriately, stupid, bleeping white man. More to the point, consider his latest film, Only Lovers Left Alive, about the romantic existential plight of two vampires. The American auteur, and also graduate of Tisch, has changed the terms in which he describes postmodern man. One of the vampires, a centuries-old musical great, is depressed. His art carries no meaning for a human world that, ironically, has itself become dead. Humans care only about money. They are destroying the earth, and art has been replaced by entertainment. Lamenting this world of men in which he is stuck, the beast that feeds upon the life of humans repeatedly sighs, bleeping zombies. He sees humans as the waking dead. The vampire sees us as dead. And in fact, in the film, the vampiric food typically comes in canisters stolen from an antiseptic blood bank. There are no true lives from which to suck blood. If we are to cultivate life, we must not only consider society in terms of political laws and intellectual principles, we must not only look at the level of system, we must look at the level of sense. John Paul said, in our present social context, there is need to develop a deep critical sense capable of discerning true values and authentic needs. Let's put this in another way. The culture of life is not only about philosophy or law, it is also about living aesthetics. It is about the way our experience of the world and the meaning of it are connected. We must consider then that complex side of human consciousness where organized perceptions and emotional effects form our interpretation of the world. We must consider our society's aesthetic forms, which cultivate our value system, and we must take the good fight there as well. Value system is John Paul's phrase. I want therefore to think about one of the major sites of our cultural consciousness, film. Describing how film comes to be experienced by us will help us to say something about how a film tends to arrange and interpret that experience. Okay, so this is the meat of the lecture more properly now. So what am I talking about when I say film? In an original sense, film is the recording material onto which an image is mechanically projected. Light is controlled and directed so as to project an image of a real or original object. This image is recorded onto some material, for example, traditionally at least, a strip of tape. Although there are ways human agents can manipulate the effects of light and various other factors of setting, it is the camera that captures the image. The machine shoots moving things, and the dead result of the capture is called a negative, which is later projected, this time for viewing. Think of a James Bond introduction. The barrel of the gun is also the scope of a camera and the assassin's gun. Bond rakishly pivots around to shoot an enemy straight in the direction of the audience. At the same time, this is the director's most direct shot of 007. Of the many James Bond titles, the one that comes to my mind is A View to a Kill. Film, as I'm describing it then, is rooted in photography. These photographic foundations are disputed, not least today, because of advances in technology. Many Hollywood movies are still, in fact, shot by film cameras, but they are subsequently digitized for screening. They all are. But even with digital technology, the record is composed of fragmented bits of binary code that orchestrate the electrical charges that would put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And they seem to do quite successfully. At any rate, in both analog and digital videography, the recorded image is a kind of deadened and even decomposed body that has been brought back to life, or some kind of life. The filmmaker, as I'm describing it, is like Dr. Frankenstein. The brain of a dead man waiting to live again in a body I made with my own hands. Look, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. I never was an actor. The very form of film involves a kind of life, death, and resurrection. The original is alive, the recorded image is dead, and the projected image is resurrected. But will this monster kill us through no fault of its own? Discussion of film's animation harks back to cartoons. Indeed, along with photography, cartoons are the ancestors of film. Etymologies are notoriously difficult to determine, even when coinage is only 100 or so years in the past. But another, more popular word for film is movie. A film shows moving pictures. Accordingly, a filmmaker is a cinematographer. He or she writes movement, graphs kinesis. Individual frames are drawn, and when run together, one after the other, the figures in those frames appear to move. They are brought to life. They are given souls. Anime. Animated pictures of this sort existed long before mechanical boxes were capturing or projecting light. We all made flipbooks in grade school, I believe, only somewhat differently. Werner Herzog's mesmerizing documentary, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, finds pictorial animation at the origins of humanity. He gives us a rare look at the oldest cave paintings in history known at the time. 35,000 years old in southern France, almost twice as old as Lascaux, those of Lascaux. Older ones by 5,000 or 10,000 years were found actually last year in Indonesia. Thanks to a landslide that early on sealed off the cave's mouth, the paintings are in pristine condition. Think about that. These paintings of bulls, horses, ibexes, and other animals are so deep within the cave's depths that no sunlight could enter to illuminate them. And so, aside from the purpose of the paintings, itself a mystery to us, the viewer is led to ask, how were these paintings originally viewed? Perhaps they were not merely seen, but, as we say with movies, watched. One can imagine the animals animated in movement as the firelight flickered against the undulating walls of the cave. It is a cultural analog, of course, of Plato's allegorical cave. And ancient forms of shadow play remain current in some societies. Either way, it appears that there is something primal about the urge to watch movies, in wombs of caves or not. But let us leave aside these examples and illusions. In modern movies, individual frames or digitized bits, of themselves lifeless, are mechanically run together to give the appearance of living motion. The primary aesthetic conceit of film, at least as I'm narrowly describing it, is this illusion of organic motion, the semblance of life. We watch it go by. The movie watcher is necessarily, therefore, a movie goer. There are two further things to consider. The first has to do with production. A movie is not simply found in the filmic record, that is, on the film strip or in the file, nor is it found by sitting in on a movie set. A movie is found in films that have been produced. Certain shots are edited out and rearranged. Shots and scenes from other takes and films are interspliced. Even more, computer-generated images can be superimposed upon the live recorded images, and so forth. Not for nothing, one early movie great thought montage and juxtaposition to be the essence of film's aesthetic. The photographic frames and digital bits are elemental to the movies we watch, but something has to be done to them before they become a movie. If the filmmaker is not only a craftsman but an artist, his processes yield a distinct representational object. The film that has been produced represents an idea or sensibility the filmmaker wants to express. This point will come in later as we talk about its redemption. The second thing to consider with regard to movies and the simulation of life has to do with projection, which I've already spoken about in two ways. Film is the material onto which a live object is first projected. But this is not what we see when we watch a film. Light is projected through lenses, mirrors, and frames or fragments in order to show a moving picture on the screen. Again, what was dead has been brought to life, and it is this strangely resurrected life that is screened. We see a projection of a projection. To speak of the screen requires us to ask again, where is the film that is watched? Where is the film that I watch when I go to the IFC? To be sure, the smell might distract us from answering the question, but the fact of the matter is, while the film is projected from behind me, and perhaps relayed via satellite far above me, the movie is on the screen. Or is it? A movie occurs when the appearance of movement is given, but the screen itself has nothing to do with the appearance of motion as such. The appearance of living motion is constituted by projected light, moving images, and most formally, the viewer's mind, situated in time. More than any other art form, literature and even music included, I think, movies are aesthetic objects that formally exist in the mind of the beholder. This is all, of course, subject to dispute. Among the arts, movies are most emblematic, therefore, of modern aesthetics. The screen is not like the frame of a painting. It does not cordon off the world of presentation to showcase another world of representation. Good art will break the boundaries of its own framing and return us to the world so we can see it as representative as well. Good art does that. But the movie screen does not cordon off. It rather blocks out the rest of the world. In Clouzot's 1956 film, The Mystery of Picasso, such a zero-sum approach is manifested. We watch Picasso paint in his studio, but the paintings that were filmed are mostly destroyed after the filming. They can only be seen in the movie. Clouzot provokes us to contemplate the mysteries of creativity and vision that film tends to obfuscate. Regardless of his point, my point, the screen is both a world of show, and yet it has nothing to give. It is, after all, a screen. We are not meant to see or be present to anything else. This is not the case with other forms of art, visual art. I ran an art show in one of my previous parishes. All the parishioners' work was wonderful to behold. One immediate distinction between the professionals and the amateurs was evident. The professional artists spent time arranging their work with great intent. I specifically recall the sculptor Thomas Marsh, who's with us tonight. If art is aesthetic, and if the aesthetic is about the meaningful arrangement of perception, then the true artist will be concerned about the arrangement of his or her own art. Now, the successful artist tends to surrender this role to the tasteful connoisseur, the trained curator, whether in life or after death. And so if I go to see the Adele Bloch-Bauer, at least as I saw it 5 years ago at the Neue Gallery, I can rightly lament, as others have, the setting does not manifest the brilliant and beguiling singularity of Klimt's painting, or of what was paid for it. That bothers my ability to appreciate it as a painting, and that is someone's fault, though in this case it's not Klimt's. Differently, a consideration of the screen or the theater does not enter into one's critique of a particular movie. It might cause an annoyance, but it doesn't affect our critique of the piece of art, or whatever. A movie is a product that can be repeatedly shown theoretically in any place at any time, perhaps in some way even at every place at every time, as a parallel contrast, think of the Eucharist. The movie is both nowhere and potentially everywhere. Why? Because in one sense, the movie is the making of the mind. This point must be acknowledged in tandem with the first main point, that the movie is the making of a machine. On the one hand, the film only exists in the recording machines, and yet this recorded stuff is not a movie. Thus, on the other hand, the movie only exists in the perceiving mind. Thus, we have two fundamental structures of filmic experience. And I admit I'm kind of playing with things a little bit here. The technological and the epistemological. Undoubtedly, these points are in need of qualification, as I admit. But remember, I've been trying to unfold fundamental aspects of how a movie is given to our experience. These aspects are structurally present in our experience, even if we don't typically attend to them. So, both movie making and movie watching bring what had been alive and was made dead to apparent life. Here, recall T.S. Eliot's Burnt Norton from his Four Quartets. Here is a place of disaffection, time before and time after, in a dim light. Neither daylight investing form with lucid stillness, turning shadow into transient beauty, with slow rotation suggesting permanence, nor darkness to purify the soul, emptying the sensual with deprivation, cleansing affection from the temporal. Neither plenitude nor vacancy, only a flicker over the strained, time-ridden faces, distracted from distraction by distraction, filled with fancies and empty of meaning. Movie is a projection of a projection of a projection, from recording machine to screening machine to receiving mind. Its life-giving potential will be determined then by its use of chiaroscuro, to employ Eliot's images. Whether its light can invest form with lucid stillness, while its dark cleanses affection from the temporal. But perhaps the analogy to painting above, occasioned by reference to the screen, is unfair. Is not theater, that is, live drama, the better analog for film? One thing to say is that film is a bit like opera. It is a kind of Wagnerian Gesamtkunstwerk, all art. Bergman said it was the modern cathedral. Not only painting and drama, but also music and the literary arts are analogues and ingredients of film. Secondly, as a historical matter, the use of film is closer to the work of news documentation than fine theatrical art. Yet still, we must consider the particular resemblances to theater. Drama is rooted in the tension between characters or actors. Drama is born when the speaking one becomes the interacting two. We can consider plays strictly as literary works, but this seems only an inflection, no matter how long Hamlet is. Like a musical score, a dramatic text is intended by its author to be interpreted and performed, not simply read. This is, of course, up for debate. And with drama, the core of the performance is in the actors, the ones who manifest action and interaction. I won't describe what it means to be an actor. Kevin Collins should tell us someday. He is certainly an impressive one to watch. But what about differences between stage actors and screen actors? First, the actor and the audience are mutually present in the one, but not in the other. As Stanley Cavell has said, the stage has actors, but the screen has stars. The latter are gazed at from afar. What we behold has long since passed. This is one of the reasons why it seems so special for some of us to see movie stars in real life. When we watch their movies, we are not seeing them. We are seeing close-ups of them, various angles of them, scenes of action that have been composed over various takes. Conversely, they do not see us. They do not sense us. They do not even respond to us. Of course, they may consider their fans often and love us, but this is something different. They are not acting precisely for us, but for the cameras and the filmmakers. Also, unlike the stage, with movies, the directors and producers are generally more noteworthy than the writers. Why is that? Because the object of film in making and viewing is the projected image. The power of drama is rooted in the mystery and challenge of freedom brought to life by the talent of actors. The mystery of characters and dramatic tension parallels the mystery of actors in tension with their audience. This is lacking. This then is the third dynamic of the film experience, the eclipsing of personal interaction, which is the play of spirit. A good film is able to represent human freedom and is also able to elicit the spectator's free response. Any fool can shock and provoke. The artist engages, challenges, invites to contemplation and ethical response. At any rate, Although filmic consciousness seems to be about personal interaction in some way, personal presence tends to be absent from its structure. All right, we can begin to think about the aesthetics of film now. Did I say 1 hour? I meant 3 hours. As we do so, recall our definition of aesthetic. It is a frame of reference according to which perceptions are apprehended, arranged, and interpreted. A framework in which sensation and meaning is connected. We have considered 3 dynamic elements of film that structure our experience of movies. I believe these elements dispose film toward an aesthetics of death. First, technological. This kind of review and summary. The culture of death is marked by technologization. Technology no longer extends human agency as it always has. It now tends to replace it. Movie technology tends to outstrip humanity both on the filmmaking and film viewing sides. Interestingly, ancients and medievals thought that the human eye projected a beam of light to apprehend its objects. An object is etymologically that against which, something is thrown, yectum. According to the outdated theory, the eye's light hits the object and then presents the eye with an image that is captured or receives. But while our theory of vision has advanced, our practice has degenerated. In movies, the machine projects a beam of light that hits against the screen, which is blank. Something has happened to the aesthetic eye. There is no object on the screen. It is entirely in the subject. And the subject, in the first case, I have argued, is the machine. On the other hand, the object is also in the mind. This is the subject in the second sense. Thus, our second point, epistemological. Plato's cave was the first movie theater epistemology. He encouraged us to break free from fascination with penumbral images, which only seem to possess the source of their own movement. We must seek the source of light, which is both outside the cave and within. We must return to the cave to lead others out. I shall return to discuss the source of a good film's aesthetic light. But without such transcendence, the source of light is the mechanical projector and the sensing mind. Sensing. Importantly, the Enlightenment Scotsman David Hume drew an analogy similar to Plato's. The mind is a kind of theater, he said, where several perceptions successively make their appearance. They pass, repass, glide away, and mingle in an infinite variety of postures and situations. The mind, you see, does no more than process the sensations of the physical world. Immanuel Kant, for you philosophers, is but a step away from this. We can no longer access reality. We can only speak of our construal of sensory experience. My second point, then, closely follows upon the first, about the seeing subject as constitutively mechanical. A sensualized subjectivism is but the flip side of a technologized subjectivism. Just think about our debates today about sexuality. The third point, spiritual or personal. Technology and epistemology, as I've been narrowly describing them, deaden the embodied mystery of human life. Death is classically understood as the separation of soul from body. And that is just what modernity does. It separates the spiritual form of personal existence from the body of animal sensation. To borrow vocabulary, and mold it a little bit from Charles Taylor, there is no transcendent frame of our experience. And yet our situation is one of excarnation. As a result, the dramatic mystery of personal freedom tends to lose out. Despite our age's apparent activism, true responsibility dies when the soul is separated from the body. This separation occurs when the body is overtaken by the machine and the soul is limited to the processes of a mind's subjective arrangement of sensation. And indeed, our society has a pronounced sense of collective guilt, but none of us is individually responsible. Enter the therapeutic. These three structural dynamics of film, technological, epistemological, and spiritual or personal, coalesce in one general framework which I have described as a transition from life to death to simulated life. The evangelist John warned of Antichrist, that is, the spirit of those who deny that Christ came in the flesh. A corollary spirit is of those who deny resurrection in the flesh. As the late modern age's unique aesthetic medium, film is, I believe, constituted by death. It is a kind of anti-resurrection, which does not so much oppose embodied life as simulate it, tending to render it for the purposes of entertainment and mystification. We think we are essentially liberated, but we are less so. Again, think of current debates. It is only when the body does not matter that same-sex marriage and sex changes become not merely conceivable or even permissible, but the very icons of freedom and justice. Just wait until the romantic comedy catches up with politics. Our TV shows already intimate what is ahead, and quite apparently, we are watching. The opiate of the masses is not religion, but the movies, or more basically and widely, the ceaseless spectacle of two-dimensional electronic images as deployed by hidden forces in its culture. The ubiquitous eye-screen is an idol. Profoundly related and unable to be addressed is our news media culture, which simulates public space and public involvement. The public square is in fact a boob tube. Closely allied to this visual culture is popular music, which furthermore depends upon the video for its effect. And consider the modern sports arena, where electronic images and sounds flash about, increasingly encroaching upon the embodied context of organized play. You can go to a football game and everybody's looking at the screen because it's a lot bigger. It's really weird. We live threatened between two flanks that assault us with a barrage of images regarding information and entertainment. The one does not necessarily attain truth, and the other does not necessarily attain beauty. As a result, the well-informed and roundly entertained society does not necessarily intend goodness. Okay, yeah. All this being said, I'm not suggesting that we give up in movies. One, I love them. Two, I know there are a bunch of you film junkies out here, so I don't want to get beat up. But three, I really do believe in this medium. Okay? I think the artful making and critical watching of film is a unique place to work the redemption of culture, the redemption of modern culture. Of course, it will be in a modern key, and therefore decidedly technological and epistemological or mental. With film, we have an art that is constituted by the modern need for redemption, I think. Recall what was said about the photographic basis of film. A photographic portrait shoots the figure before it, capturing a particular moment of that person's life, removing it from its living situation. Film takes a step beyond this, reanimating what it has killed. But photography and film can be considered in another opposite way. A shot may take away life, but a snapshot can also reveal life. It can manifest the mystery of the incarnate moment. How is a good photographer characterized? As having a good eye. Good photography is able to show what it does not show, to manifest through hiding, introducing the viewer into its camera obscura. Entering this dark or mystical chamber, the viewer is made present to what is absent, to what is hidden. What is necessary is the artist's attunement and eye for this mystery. And if the filmmaker's eye sees by a light that transcends itself as well as the machine, there is hope. There is the possibility that whatever the filmmaker's philosophical or even political agenda, the moving images are animated by a transcendent source. Consider, on the one hand, the film Boyhood. I'm sure many of you loved it. It has been both popularly and critically acclaimed. That's why I say that. Its major attraction is that the actors, especially the central boy, were filmed over a period of 12 years. You all know this, right? Many of you know this. Okay, good. Movies tend to separate living action from their living actors. So, I can no longer see Sir Alec Guinness portray Gloucester or Falstaff on stage. I never could. But I can always watch him as Obi-Wan on the screen. The trick of Boyhood, then, is to introduce an actor's development in time into the character's development in time. It is an attempt to transcend photography's limitation as less than living, the capture I'm talking about. Now, according to reviews, critical and popular, we love Boyhood because it seems so true to life. But, among other things, the fact that every character is something of a type should put us on guard. Toward the end of the film, the boy's mother, having seen her son make it to young adulthood and enter college, having herself survived two divorces while making herself a university professor, shouts out and cries, "I just thought there would be more." I think her exclamation manifests what should be the reaction of the viewer. I just thought there would be more. What is the mystery of life in and beyond boyhood? What is the mystery of being in time, of growth? You know what I'm realizing? She says to her son Mason, quote, my life is just going to go, like that, the series of milestones, getting married, having kids, getting divorced, the time that we thought you were dyslexic, when I taught you how to ride a bike, getting divorced again, getting my master's degree, finally getting the job I wanted, sending Samantha off to college, sending you off to college. You know what's next, huh? It's my bleeping funeral. Just go and leave my picture. End quote. Now, the mention of the picture or photograph here is significant, especially on the heels of the intimation of death. The only thing that Mason has ever found personally interesting is taken up photographs, photography. And significantly, photography is a real interest of the young man. More important than the movie film, the movie director seems to be suggesting, is the photographic film. Although Mason would seem to tell us about the beauty of life through growing up past boyhood, he's really telling us about death as the stuff of existence. In watching Boyhood, the viewer should expect something more from this marvelous feat of direction and production, and indeed, the film is seamless. It has a really good feeling song, and it works as a whole. You don't feel jarred. But like Mason's mom, who echoes Peggy Lee, I think we're supposed to exclaim, I thought there'd be more. In the end, Mason goes off to college, leaving his mother with his photograph. Arriving at school, Mason meets a few new people, including a girl who immediately takes interest in him. They ditch orientation, eat psychedelic mushrooms, and go to hike in the desert. Mason's last line to the film's 3-hour gestation is, it's like it's always right now. Now, the always right now perhaps suggests divine eternity. But the postmodern it's like suggests simulation to me. Life is a bunch of cool pictures. Take a bunch of them, let chemicals do the developing, and enjoy the show. Now, that is one aesthetics of death, but consider an example of another kind. The fascinating film about the recently discovered photographer Vivian Maier can help our description. The documentary is something of a detective story. A young entrepreneur routinely purchases lots of unclaimed storage. In one instance, he obtains thousands of photos and many more undeveloped rolls of film. He shows these photos to connoisseurs and experts of photographic art. The dumbfounded judgments are unanimous. The work is without peer. But who was this photographer? She was a strange woman, possibly faked her accent and lived a reclusive life, but for her work as a nanny for several families. Wherever she took the kids out, she took photos. Or better, wherever she wanted to take photos, she took the children. But Maier went through great lengths to keep her hobby a total secret from everyone. Unlike Sugarman, she died with her secret. She was obsessed with an art whose power to show acts through what it hides. But this art she kept hidden, perhaps because it showed what was hidden about herself. Thanks to the film, we have been given in a way her story and her art. Film has brought the photographs to life, which is in fact what film can do. The filmmaker of Finding Vivian Maier does not seem to be particularly religious or philosophical. He doesn't seem to be non-religious or non-philosophical, but it's not an element. But John Maloof was captivated by the mystery of one woman's art and personhood. He was entranced by the mystery of human life, enchanted by the secret of beauty and of her beauty. Accordingly, his film communicates the interplay of what is seen and unseen, of what can be discovered without ever being comprehended. The more Vivian Maier is uncovered, the more she remains hidden. The more we see what we do not see, the more we see with wonder. This very structure of mystery is at play in our relationship with God. He reveals and gives us His love through incarnate death on a cross. In finally showing us His love, He consummately hides it. I do think film tends toward an aesthetics of death, but the task for the culture of life is to make and envision this aesthetics of death on the side of aesthetics, not on the side of death. In the culture of death, death is the endpoint of technologized life, where only mental perspectives and titillating sensations matter, and authentic understandings of freedom are reduced to politics in some cases. But I believe the very form of film manifests a modern need for redemption. Its very form is one that needs redeeming. This is one of the unique things about film, that its very form itself cries out for redemption. A sense that true life can be cultivated in a world that is everywhere technologized, mentalized, and perhaps immoralized. Existence is still an embodied but transcendent romance worth risking, and film can show us this. Okay, I'm almost done. So I now finally arrive at my final set of comments. Excuse me. I promised I would end on a note of possibility, not defeat. And in this regard, it is precisely the romance worth risking I want to consider. I have already hinted that I believe documentaries are capable of bearing an aesthetics of death in the promising sense. The documentarist is often seeking to convey mystery and singularity. Oddly, as close as documentaries are to news-like forms, like Dateline NBC or something, because they attend so intensely upon the human, they can often yield attractive works of art in their own right. I dare mention Blackfriars Media in this regard. I was paid to say that. Kidding. Documentarists can uniquely aim for the drama, mystery, horror, strangeness of human existence. And their subject matter easily prompts the viewer to investigate the reality further. See, this returning to the world. Now, even if this means looking up the Wikipedia page for McDonald's after watching Fast Food Nation, my point remains. The work returns you to the world with a new intentionality. The movement of life, death, and resurrection is promisingly at play. There's much to discuss here with documentaries, but I have to leave it aside for any number of reasons. Instead, I just want to make a few comments about film art on the other end of spectrum from documentaries. More specifically, to talk haphazardly about some of the work of Terrence Malick. Another friar of my province, whose ideas I greatly respect, Father Albert Paretsky, has apparently lectured on Malick. I just found this out recently. Unfortunately, I did not have the chance to seek out his understanding. Most of us have probably seen The Tree of Life, right? 7 films have been released under Malick's direction, and another one coming out this year, actually already premiered in France, I think. He has a characteristic style, to name but a few elements, most of which suggest the transcendent. Lots of vertical shots of the sky and trees. Lots of attention to images of natural light, water, and simple human touches, such as the hand on shoulder or hand in hand. Narrative that is more suggested than traced, and pensive voiceovers, which are more important than dialogue. His actors, generally bona fide stars of the industry, at least the men, are never quite precisely the center of his camera shots. In one sense, talking about these characteristic elements of his style, Malick is easy to discuss. He wants to unfold the hidden or unnoticed elements of feeling, desire, and orientation toward a transcendence that is yet somehow imminent. In another sense, though, his work, like the man himself, is difficult to pin down. He is notoriously reclusive. And of his films, some say he's a Christian evangelist. We don't like it, it's too preachy. Some say he's a Heideggerian philosopher. Deep down he's a nihilist. Some say he's self-indulgent and pretentious. He's probably a bit of all of these, though not in equal measures. Regardless, my interest is less in what he seems to be saying than how he says it. And I think he offers a great example of a redemptive aesthetics of death. Hints and suggestions. These are not full readings. The opening of To the Wonder gives us a clue. A couple in the throes of love, Neil and Marina, are traveling to Mont Saint-Michel. They are shown laughing, frolicking, and making mischief at their seats on a train by a window. The picture is a bit grainy. We soon realize that Neil, an American played by Ben Affleck, is the one recording these scenes on a digital camcorder. The picture is able to transcend his point of view, as a small handheld can be extended and turned in multiple ways. He is both the recording agent and the recorded subject. Part of the film's possibility, then, is to free one from one's own perspective. Film, then, should be the perfect counterpoint and instrument of romantic eros. But even so, there is a more fundamental, absolute action that escapes even this transcendence of perspective. The film soon switches, of course, to the director's camera, as Neil and Marina, still at play on the train, are shown more intently against the backdrop of a passing countryside as the train goes by. The window of the train is itself like a movie screen, showing the pictures moving by, all manner of things passing by. Two quintessentially modern inventions that have radically changed human experience of space and time, the camera and the train, each manifest the temporality of being. In their practical use, they seem to escape the confines of time, whether it's the personal movie that forever records the first blossoms of love, or whether it is the TGV, which runs at super high speeds and yet precisely on time. Their effects juxtaposed, though, we are led to wonder, where is the still point from which to discern the origin and terminus of all motion? Now, for Malick, I do not think there's a transcendent pure active being whose sheer dynamism is also sheer rest. There is no unmoved first mover of the ancient or medieval here. I do not think. Subject to argument. But Malick would not leave us to modernity's sense of motion, nor to its law of inertia. On the contrary, things do indeed have a tendency to change in motion. The irrepressible dynamics of romance and breakup testify, in fact, to this internal elan that is yet sourced from elsewhere. Marina asks, what is this love that loves us? So the couple arrives at Mont Saint-Michel, that wonder of the medieval world, whose monastic spire reaches toward heaven, as its military fortress is rooted in the earth. They amble around the mysterious beach that surrounds the island, whose low tides allow one to walk on water. Indeed, the island itself is memory's testimony to the forces of erosion. The flow of time will wear everything away, including romantic love, Malick says. But there remains a celestial orientation, issued perhaps as a query, a celestial orientation to our being in time. Surely, Malick's films seek to retune our feel for succession and duration. Ideally, they should in fact change our expectation of film's possibility in general. We could recommence our evening on this subject alone. In The Tree of Life, fantastic technology is used, not to depict imminent disaster and spectacular contest, but to meditate on the mystery and origins of the universe. Beautiful, fascinating, terrible. Combined with an amazing deployment of classical music, which is probably the more important discourse than the dialogue between characters, Malick reorients our sense of time and the pathos of being, of what comes to be and what passes away. Again, to keep with the Tree of Life for a moment, just think of the origins of the universe sequence. As gases are bursting and stars are forming, Zbigniew Brzezinski's piercing lacrimosa is blaring. But Malick's aesthetics of death has not only to do with his sense of time. He wants us to think differently about death. He wants us to sense it differently. He wants the film to reorient our very being toward death. So in The Tree of Life, a middle-aged man is provoked by the anniversary of his younger brother's death to remember and ponder the significance of life. At one point early on, he is shown ascending a glass elevator in a tall building composed entirely of windows. This character is played by Sean Penn. Speaking to his father on the telephone, he admits, "I feel like I'm bumping into walls." Our technology is unable in itself to move us in any significant sense. At the end of the day, finite being is limited and self-enclosed, like looking at one's sibling or one's lover in another room or behind a window, completely unawares of our speculation. But if we can feel the light that breaks in, the light that sources our feelings and desires, even death can be understood as but a note in a much grander cosmic symphony. Malick's war movie, The Thin Red Line, is most concerned with envisioning a new kind of seeing. This WW2 film involves a veritable army of characters, but focuses mostly on two W's, Welsh and Wit, played by Sean Penn and Jim Caviezel. This is a retelling or situated in the Battle of Guadalcanal. Similar to the man and the woman in the Tree of Life, these two foil and mirror each other and help to reveal each other's hidden intuitions about reality. The phenomenologist in Malick supports the idea that the other reveals one to oneself. In an opening scene, Penn's character is grooming himself before a mirror. The looking glass is not attached to a wall, but it's on a freestanding basin, which allows for stations on the other side of the mirror. So, as Sergeant Welsh is looking at himself, cutting his airs, about to go into battle, he is at the same time looking at a private on the other side. This young man, by the name of Train, is anxiously talking to Welsh. Despite his worry, Train proclaims, "The only things that are permanent is dying in the Lord. This war ain't going to be the end of me, and it ain't going to be the end of you neither." Train bears a tattoo on his arm that reads 1 John 4:4. We look up that passage and we find, "You are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than him who is in the world." Though he is riddled with worry, Train bears hidden within himself the divine secret of overcoming and life. In fact, he is depicted in none of the movie's battle scenes, and we only see him again at the end, returning home alive. Welsh, on the other hand, a seasoned soldier of war, would seem to be perfectly resigned. But placed in front of the mirror, seeing himself while talking to Train, who is another image of himself, we know that this man's heart contains a world of anxiety and longing that his expressions otherwise conceal. Thin Red Line focuses more on Private Witt's way of seeing the world. The eyes of Caviezel are routinely focused upon, a lot of close-ups of the eyes. Early on, having gone AWOL, he is looking at an islander woman, there in the South Pacific, submerged in water with their children. That causes him to think of his mother, and more specifically of her death. What was the secret of her facing death with such calm, he wants to know. Is there any hint of immortality in the world? Strangely, he seeks out company with the dying, having become a stretcher carrier. He likes to look at wounded and dying people in the face. Does he have a death wish? Is he sick? But his somewhat creepy desire to look at the face of death and search for glory should be, among other things, ironic for the viewer. We should feel ourselves accused. Our films are saturated with scenes of death and carnage, and yet none of us sees, for that matter, any more clearly into the mystery of dying, or the beauty that it can carry. We should return to our world with an eye for death and for hints of immortality. His eye for death is also an eye for compassion. He acknowledges in the midst of war, everyone wants salvation for himself. But as this voiceover is playing, he is shown pouring water over another soldier's head. Later on, in a contemplative moment, he pours water over his own head, and then, profligately wasting scarce water, like the sinful woman in Luke, pours water upon a plant leaf. On the one hand, the specter of Gnosticism rises again, as Witt has wondered, is there one world soul? On the other hand, the mystery of communion in death is also able to resource the gift of death in self-sacrifice. How? Toward the end, a young and nervous private by the name of Fife has been assigned to reconnoiter some land, which everybody knows is a death mission for him. Witt sees the boyish worry on Fife's face and volunteers himself to accompany him. Now ultimately he saves Fife's life, and indeed that of his company, by drawing enemy attention upon himself. He himself becomes something of an island, like Guadalcanal, surrounded by Japanese guns. Next, in the next scene, the island's dirt is shown over his grave with his fellows surrounding him. Welsh is by the grave, on the verge of tears, and cries out to the bygone Witt, "Where's your spark now?" But although he seems not to see it, raging against it in rebellion, he bears that very spark within him. Indeed, Witt's death is an answer to a kind of prayer that Welsh earlier uttered. Penn's character at one point says, "If I never meet you in this life, let me feel the lack." As he cries then by the grave of Welsh, birds are shown flying free. And a final scene shows a baby palm sprouted in water, an arresting parallel to the rifle and helmet planted upon the mound of sand of Welsh's grave. That was all meandering, to be sure. But it is all to say that technology can be used to outstrip technologism. And a film auteur's personal vision and philosophy can be employed, or deployed rather, to transcend the confines of epistemology. And technique and subject matter can be arranged so as to manifest the drama of man before God, even if, in our post-Christian age, it is but the question of God. When this is achieved, movies like Malik's can have tremendously sad storylines and yet not leave one depressed. At least not me. But one has to be willing to see the essential problem of death so as to imagine the possibilities beyond it. When such imagination is employed against the meaninglessness of death, the very form of film can be a witness to the possibility of resurrection in a post-Christian world, or late Christian world. I think this is one of the reasons that the St. Francis-like character in Miles Connolly's Mr. Blue was so hopeful about films, if you know the charming little book. Artists, Christian artists, are essential to society. We need filmmakers. So buy your kids cameras and let them settle for dumb phones. Have contests in your parishes and communities. From the mess of second-rate art, which is still a world better than kitsch, vocations to artistry will emerge. Don't just stand there and watch the world go by. Shoot something and bring it to life. Thank you.